There's a spirit in the Outaouais, some might say so. From the valley of the Ottawa to the hills of the Gatineau. And the spirit finds expression in the arts and in the songs, in the paintings, in the sculptures, in this place that we call home. Call this heart of the hidden hills. Call this heart of the hidden hills.
Hello everyone, welcome back to our Hidden Hills. I'm Matt Selleck with the 100 Mile Arts Network. If you've been following our program, you'll know that we've taken viewers on a journey to explore local artists and venues from each of the different regions that make up our network. We visited Grand Calumet Island and the Pontiac in the west, and then traveled north from Low to Maniwaki, visiting communities along the way. In our final episode today, we'd like to share with you our recent travels to the regions of Chelsea and La Pêche. We begin in Old Chelsea with a visit to a local musician and playwright whose work has been a big part of the Canadian cultural scene for many decades. He's no stranger to these hills, and he's certainly no stranger to this program, for it is his voice and song that has greeted viewers each week in the opening titles of our show. Let's look at our visit with Mr. Ian Tamblyn.
I know you must travel, I know you'll roam. It's born in the blood that you're far, far from home. We wish you safe passage and hope that you're well. Send us a postcard from the world. It's green in the garden, the sky mostly blue. Your friends have come over, they ask after you. We tell them your stories and say that you're fine. We miss you most of the time. One of my first songs that I recorded actually was from these hills. It's called Moon in the Maples. And since that time I've written quite a few songs about the Gatineau Hills. Number of stories in the Gatineau Hills seems almost endless. It also has influenced me as a place of peace and quiet where I could come back to. I did a lot of touring, sometimes putting on 60,000 kilometers a year, traveling around Canada. So coming back to Chelsea and the Gatineau Hills, the old soul of the Gatineau Hills was always, it was home. That's what it was. Right now I'm using about 5 or 6 guitars, depending on the performance. If I'm doing my own songs, well, then I'm informing my own work. But a soundtrack for a play, well, it's what the play or the soundtrack demands in terms of its sonic. So it ranges from project to project. I tend to be fairly driven and project oriented. So if one door doesn't open or if one avenue of exploration isn't open, then I'll go to another one and see how that's working. I was not particularly successful academically. I basically was unable to do anything else. It wasn't a matter of choosing it, it chose me. It's what I could do. I could play guitar. I can't really sing, but I've managed to make a career of it. I do write about conditions of the heart. All the projects I've done are like children, and some have been quite nasty, but maybe you love them more for that. If anybody said, well, that project didn't work, well, I would defend that project much longer than I would one that was successful. Each project that I do is an imperfection. You keep on working. We need people to come together and support each other and champion each other in their different fields of work. I think that's really important, and it kind of goes against the Canadian character because we're humble and we tend not to boast about ourselves, but to some degree, I think we should. Art and music is important for the same reason that it always has been important. It illustrates that we have the time beyond just working and going to bed and getting up and working again. The fact that there has been time to do art illustrates, in some sense, a luxury, but it is a necessary luxury to show our humanity. If I was giving advice to a 22 or 23-year-old, I probably wouldn't. If I noted that their commitment to what they were doing was destined in some way, that they had no choice but to do what they were doing, then I wouldn't give them any advice because they'd pay no attention to it. I'd just get down to the work and go, okay, how are we going to make this work? But at the same time, there's two things. One, think laterally, and if the door that you're banging on doesn't open, then look for the one that swings.
Ian Tamblyn continues to write, perform, and teach across the country and beyond. To learn more about his activities and work, just follow the links at the end of our program. Now, our next two artists both found themselves drawn to work in the hills by the wonderfully supportive arts community. Our first, Kendall Ayub Nichols, is an award-winning painter and illustrator whose work has been exhibited both in Canada and the United States. We follow our visit with her with photographer Helen Ann Fortin, who's been dubbed the next Karsh by clients and followers alike. In a day and age that's dominated by digital photography, she still works with black and white film. Let's take a closer look at them both.
Well, my husband and I moved to Wakefield 5 years ago, specifically to move to a creative community. And we really felt that the people here, the atmosphere is really soulful and really conducive to art creation. There's just so much going on within the community. So it's really inspiring for me as a figurative artist to be doing paintings of the people that live here. I have always worked with oil paint, oil on canvas, oil on board. But I love the way that oil paint is really expressive. The colors are really vibrant. When I'm in a rut, I just make sure that I just continue to get myself in my studio. I usually set up a schedule for myself so that I'm at least an hour a day just continuing to work through that on anything. So even if I don't feel inspired or I don't know what I'm doing or what project is next, just continuing to get into the studio and practice helps me to move through being stuck. What's important for me in terms of what my work says really is about how it impacts other people. I really believe that human connection is extremely important. I feel like we live in a world where there's so much exterior going on, so much focus on who we are, what we do, what we look like, everything like that. So I want in my work people to look at it and feel a connection to the person that they're seeing, that's the subject matter in the painting, and it sparks something for them about them being human and what does that connection mean to them, something deeper, something more spiritual than just the physical. The elements that I think make an art community strong are just the people within the community being open to exploring different forms of art. So that's why I love living in Wakefield so much, because there's musicians, there's visual artists, there's theater, there's writing, there's just food, even all the restaurants in town. There's just so much dedication to just exploring art and sharing it together. And I feel that that's what makes this community so fantastic and such a wonderful place to live. I was really fortunate. I grew up in a very creative family. Both my parents are actors. I've always been painting and drawing ever since I was in kindergarten. Anytime I'd start to explore different avenues of life, my parents were always nudging me constantly to be like, how's your painting going? How's your drawing going? They always were on top of me about it. So for me, it was something that I was able to really incorporate into my life on a regular basis. And now I can't imagine a day going by without having it in my life. It's just part of who I am. I just completed these 2 large scale paintings of both of my sons. I've always enjoyed working on a bigger scale. And over the years, I've tended to work smaller only because it's just more convenient. But working on these 2 large scale pieces made me realize that there's a real impact when you see the full scale of the person presented. It really makes you feel like you're sitting with the person. I believe art is so important because it's what makes us human. And it's cheesy, but it's true. If you took away your favorite book, your favorite movie, your favorite music, if you eliminated that from your life, life would feel pretty boring and robotic. It makes you explore all the facets that make us human. I think I would just say, just continue to practice. Don't worry so much about the career aspect of it, even though that's really hard to do because that's part of life. I would say it's just a matter of getting the painting going, getting the painting moving, just producing, because in the production of it, you're stepping into that part of yourself that is important and is creative. That process in and of itself is worthwhile. And so not to get hung up on all the other stuff, even though that's very hard to do, but that would be the advice I'd give.
Wakefield, Quebec is a magical spot. The first time I walked through the doors of the studio, I just sensed that this is where I had to do my work. Normally clients would come and sit and have a tea ceremony with me, and that would be our first meeting. The second time we'd visit, I would do their portraits. The third time they'd come, they sit with me for 2 hours to review their artwork, and I teach them how I see and what makes a powerful portrait. Art is the stuff of the soul. Creativity is the stuff of the soul. It is the deepest part of you that you can express and give as a gift to the world. Each one of us, if we can stay connected to that creative spark that's inside, you'll simply live a happier, healthier life. So many years ago, I fell in love with a black and white photographer. The moment he put that camera to my eye and I saw a leaf covered with dew, I was a goner, absolute and utter goner. He thought that I had a great eye. I didn't have a lot of confidence in myself. I then spent 13 years studying at the feet of the greatest photographers in North America. And I wrote down every word they said. And eventually they couldn't teach me anymore. I became me. I work in film. I love the quality, the longevity of film. Everything is created in a darkroom. Every artwork that leaves here is hand-printed, selenium toned, and hand retouched. I was learning my skills in the States when we were transitioning from film to digital. And one day I walked in on one of my mentors in Kentucky and I said, "How are you doing, Tim?" And he said, "Terrible." And I said, "Well, why?" And he said, "I've been trying to replicate the work that I do in film onto this computer, and I can't achieve the quality that I've seen for years in the darkroom." And so I guess that's why I've remained as a black and white film photographer through all these years. I haven't done a lot of portraits in the last few months because of COVID. However, I had a client call me recently saying, "Helen Ann, I'm dying. I have about 9 months to live. Will you celebrate this marriage of 42 years? And I said I'd be honored. And that evening when I was reviewing the rushes from that photo shoot, I sat there and I cried. People are magnificent. I want their portrait to become an artwork that can last forever. It is very, very privileged work to be able to sit and capture the spirit or the essence of a person or a family. And that hasn't changed since day one.
You know, sometimes when an old building or space has fallen into disuse, someone comes along and breathes new life into it. This was the case when a non-profit arts co-op repurposed an old school in Farrelton, turning it into a studio space and artist residence. Now the space hosts workshops, programs, residencies, and is home to more than a dozen local artists at work. Here's our visit to PATH, the Farrelton's Artists Space.
We were alerted to the fact that there was an empty building, this old decommissioned school in Farrelton, Quebec. And as there was a huge need for studio space for visual artists in the region, we quickly came together and approached the school board, the Portage de l'Outaouais, and with the idea of renting the space and changing it into studio spaces for visual artists. In the very beginning, it was by word of mouth. We were approached by other artists who were looking for studio space. And soon after that, we started advertising, and we were able to fill all the spaces, much to our surprise, in about a couple of months. And once an artist is accepted, they are then shown a studio space that is available. So this doesn't happen often, but occasionally an artist leaves and a studio space becomes free. So currently we have 16 professional working artists in the studios. They do all kinds of different media. So we have people who are doing painting, encaustic, we have fiber artists here, we have photographers, we have theater as well as writers. So we really cover a large range of the various media.
PATH is quite cherished by our community, surrounding community. Another part of our mission is the offering of programming in the form of residencies, workshops, events. The effect of that, I would say, is to cultivate an audience for contemporary art in our region. PATH is handling COVID, as many, I think, in a stream of change, and any usual programming is available online. Of course, as an artist, we all look at what is COVID, what does this do for a social change and realities. Many of our artists would communicate about how does this impact our social space, our experience of space.
I recently received some funding to create a digital presentation for the PATH Open House. And I wanted to also create an opportunity for people to gather and experience art in a public way that is also safe. Eventually I'll be collecting names and contact information so people can receive an invitation to a special secret location to experience the results of this project, along with some digital projects from other artists. So that's something to come.
We got to get together in a safe, physically distanced setting here yesterday for the first time in person, which was really exciting. So we shared the work that we've made over the last couple months and did a brainstorming session about what we want to do in the future. At art school in Vancouver, my dream was always to be part of an art cooperative or an artist-run center. So when we moved to Wakefield and I found out about this place, this was like the mecca for me. And it's in a rural area, which is really rare. And so I was really grateful that they welcomed me as a member because it's a really special place.
Our last stop for the day takes us to the small community of Rupert. Here, we meet a uniquely talented individual whose musical career has been as varied as the collection of instruments he's gathered from around the world. He's a songsmith, teacher, and multi-instrumentalist. He's been involved in music on stage, in theater, and in dance and film for many decades. If you've not already seen him in action, you're in for a treat. It is our pleasure to introduce to you Mr. Brian Sanderson.
This tune lacks a title.
Quiet on deck, please!
the market man shot for the sky, and they'd be there through thick and through thin. That one felt just like a lion. I don't have any recollection of any time where music wasn't a major part of every single day. My father met my mom. He was a trumpet player, like an amateur small town trumpet player, and my mom was, and still is, the church organist and pianist, and she ran choirs. So they met her accompanying him for some trumpet solo that he was doing. So I grew up with the bassinet under the organ or under the piano. By the time it came for me to decide to take music seriously, there was a big long list of things that I already had inside me that I wasn't even aware of, thanks to my parents. So it was just the real largest process was about returning to a secular condition. It was all sacred music. Because it's hard to be an artist if you don't really own your own voice, and it's hard to own your own voice if you don't exist with real doubt. I finally realized as an artist that doubt's actually where things come from. And the measure of your willingness to flirt with doubt is kind of the measure of your capacity to even be an artist. Says he. Whatever. Mark.
You know, you've come to acquire quite an eclectic collection of musical instruments from all over the world, all kinds of different cultures. How did that come to be?
Yeah. I think it started in my late teens when I became embarrassingly aware of the skills I didn't have. I thought I was so great at music, and here's this list of potholes that are insufferable. The first pothole I had that was insufferable to me, I realized a really pathetic sense of rhythm. So I went to India and spent a year studying tabla. That, I think, was the moment that really turned things around and made it so that not only was I going to be devoted to music, but I was also going to recognize that the way I was going to enrich myself is by looking where the people around me weren't looking. That, and frankly, it's Canada. So when I'm in Europe and people say, "Hi, what's your name? What do you do?" I say, "I'm a musician." They always say something like, "Oh, what do you play? What band are you in? Where can I check you out?" That kind of thing. You come back to North America, "Hey, what's your name?" "Oh, I'm Brian." "What do you do?" "Oh, I'm a musician." What do you really do? But implicit in it is this truth about being an artist or a musician in North America, which is everyone expects that it's not a way you can possibly make a living. So when you are trying to make a living here, in my experience, you either get really good at one thing, or some variation of you're able to do lots of different things. And lots of different things. I've only been able to cobble together a musician's living by being able to be present in some musical context that doesn't include bass guitar, keyboards, or drums. This is a baglama, or a kind of a mini saz. It's also known in Turkey, they call it a jura. And I had such a great time, and still do, playing this guy. This is credited as being one of the precursors to accordions and harmonicas, because it's a free reed instrument. And the design is a couple thousand years old. But it's a little loud, eh? That's kind of the story of my life, is getting the gig, figuring out how to play the gig. And then at the end of the gig, you're like, okay, I kind of know how to play. And then like the sousaphone been a major part of my life. And it all came from just that willingness to, or not the necessity in this country of having to be willing to do whatever, because there's just not a lot of work. One of the things that Canada does do well is a really good summer festival circuit. And I would always be reminding people that they're not actually music festivals. Music is this wonderful nexus point that community can use as an exercise to practice new skills. And it all happens around the music. And it can seem like it's about the music. But the music is just this wonderful facilitator, this wonderful way of people connecting and enriching themselves. So, speaking as a musician, it's just a real honor and a great privilege, and sometimes a ridiculous burden, to be able to help in those moments where things need to be celebrated or mourned or remembered, that you can be part of a tradition that brings people together.
What are some of your favorite opportunities for performance? You know, whether you're playing for dance or like, what is it that really inspires you? You really get excited.
Okay, my favorite opportunity for performance is doing something I've not done before. Like, I've not sung this song on a fiddle in my basement. Cool.
Well, she left him with bags of his own to wallow in the slow demise, waiting for that call on his phone that just won't materialize, 'cause she carried that shimmy and moan. Didn't he say that he was her guy, that he couldn't be left all alone? Yeah, that one felt just like a lie. As the days grow shorter still, it can leave you wondering why you can never have your fill of leaving the lie behind, and the peace won't find a soul, as the tears will never run dry. Time will take its toll while we're leaving the lie behind. Yeah, time will take its toll as we're leaving the lie behind.
Little flat 7 for you there, Matt.
Well, folks, that brings us to the end of our 3-part mini-series showcase. But there are good things to come yet. Here at the 100 Mile Arts, we're always looking for new ways to showcase and support our local artists. Visit us online at 100milearts.net to learn more about who we are, upcoming projects, and of course, to check out the artists themselves. Each of the people and places that we visited on our showcase series can be found online on our website, but we also have links to many more, so be sure to check them out. And remember, the network is a resource that's free to join. So if you're part of the arts community, please feel free to sign up. It'd be great to have you on board. We'd like to thank all the artists, the local communities, our funders, and of course our viewers for their participation in this series. We couldn't have done it without you, but we do hope to do it again soon. In the meantime, keep following your passions, keep creating, and above all else, be kind to one another. We hope to see you again soon.
There's a spirit in the Outaouais, some might say a soul, from the valley of the Ottawa to the hills of the Gatineau. And this spirit finds expression in the arts and in the songs, in the paintings, in the sculpture, in this place that we call home. Call this heart of the hidden hills. Call this heart of the hidden hills. There's a painter up in Blue Sea, a sculptor in Messines, and if you're north of Cas, my friend, be sure to try the beans. And the music tumbles from the bar, Manette's in Brennan's Hill, and memories from another age, from Fairburn echo still. Call this heart of the hidden hills. Call this heart of the hidden hills. There's a filter in the co-op across from the Farrelton Bridge, accordion and fiddle and a cold beer in a fridge, an actor poised upon the stage, or fiddle at Mill Road, a vernissage that's fab, my friends. I hope you all will go. Call this heart of the hidden hills. Call this heart of the hidden hills. There's a concert up in Sheenborough, a book on the Des Moines, and echoes of Mac Beatty heard from Gavin's bar, me boys, and a winery near Shawville you can toast into the night, and in Queon there's a studio to get your tunes down right. Call this heart of the hidden hills. Call this heart of the hidden hills. There's a play that's set in Bristol as Cheryl paints her cows. And if your tastes run to classical, there's a barn in Luskville now. There's music at the cafe and photos at Earl's Hall. And if you were not mentioned, there's too much to name, y'all. Call this heart of the hidden hills. Call this heart of the hidden hills. Call this heart of the hidden hills.